In today's performance-driven world, professional college and even youth athletes will go to any measure necessary to find the extra boost they need while competing. While many performance enhancers are banned by leagues such as the NFL, NBA, and MLB, sports drinks are one way athletes like to gain that extra advantage. The sports drink market is big and rapidly expanding. According to Food Dive, in 2013, the market for sports drinks reached $6.9 billion in sales. More surprising than that, however, according to Forbes, Gatorade controls about 77% of the overall market. You can see it on the sidelines of every football game, on the bench at every basketball game, and in the dugouts of every baseball game. That big capital G logo is one of the most recognizable in the entire sports world. But how did Gatorade get to be where they are? And more importantly, is their dominance of the market justified? In 1965, the coach of University of Florida football team noticed that his players grew very tired during practices and workouts. At the university, a small group of researchers began looking into what caused football players to fatigue during the season, the main researcher being Dr. Robert Cade. Cade was born in San Antonio, Texas on September 26, 1927. He attended Brackenridge High School, and upon graduating in May of 1945, he became a pharmacist mate and served in the Navy through the end of World War II in 1948. When he returned from the war, he enrolled to attend the University of Texas at Austin. He completed all of his coursework in order to receive his bachelor's degree just 2 years later in 1950. Upon completion of his bachelor's, he enrolled at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School and graduated with a Doctor of Medicine degree in 1954. After finishing a few different internships, Cade finally landed at the University of Florida in 1961 as an assistant professor of internal medicine in its renal division. In 1965, an assistant coach from the University of Florida football team tasked Cade with answering the question of why the football players don't urinate during and after games. The coach noticed his players were struggling to play through the intense Florida heat during games and practices. Some football players were losing as much as 18 pounds during a 3-hour college football game, and most of that weight, 90 to 95%, was water. It became clear to the team of researchers that these student athletes were losing too much fluid and carbohydrates through sweat, and they were not drinking enough to replace it. They then began testing different drinks to see if they could solve this hydration problem. The team took a $43 budget and turned it into the first iteration of the well-known sports drink Gatorade. Initially, the drink did not have a pleasant taste. The ingredients included water, salt, sodium citrate, fructose, and monopotassium phosphate. The coaching staff was skeptical about the drink at first, so they only allowed the freshman squad to drink Gatorade. As promising results showed, the coach ordered that enough Gatorade be made so that the entire Florida football team could drink Gatorade at every practice and game. The first real test of the concoction was in 1965 in Florida's first game against LSU. It was an extraordinarily hot day at 102 degrees, and the LSU team faded away as the game went on, but Florida stayed strong and won the game. After the game, the coaching staff asked Cade to produce enough Gatorade for his players to drink for the rest of the season. They really hit the spotlight with their win in the Orange Bowl over Georgia Tech, where they again outlasted their opponent and came out with a win. Then Georgia Tech coach said after the game, "We didn't have Gatorade. That made the difference." When the product was first created, there was not much demand for it on the commercial market because it was an unproven product. After the game against Georgia Tech, people started to pay attention, and Cade knew that he had a product he could commercialize. In 1968, Robert Cade entered into an agreement with Stokely Van Camp Incorporated in order to start producing and selling Gatorade as a commercial product. Also in 1969, Gatorade reached an agreement to become the official sports drink of the NFL. Today, Gatorade is the official sport drink of the NFL, NBA, MLB, MLS, NHL, and many more professional and college sports teams all across the country. The NBA even recently announced that the official minor league of the NBA, the Development League more commonly known as the D-League, would be renamed the NBA Gatorade League, or the G-League. One of the most effective ways that Gatorade has captured so much of the market is getting high-profile athletes to endorse their product.
I think athletes prefer Gatorade over water because Gatorade sponsors elite athletes, and athletes just want to be the best they can, so that they think they get extra things when they have Gatorade, gives them better performance, whatnot.
By connecting the faces of great players with Gatorade, any time that player spends on live TV is extra advertising. Some of the most notable athletes in history have endorsed Gatorade. The list of athletes includes Vince Carter, Dwight Howard, Dwayne Wade, Peyton Manning, LaDainian Tomlinson, Derek Jeter, and perhaps most prominent of all, Michael Jordan. Jordan had an illustrious career, and Gatorade piggybacked right off of that.
Those advertisements for Gatorade that they have all the high sports figures doing, they're just so cleverly done, you know. I mean, they got like the Gatorade color sweating out of your system and stuff like that. I think those are kind of cool things for people to look at. And certainly they're associating the drink with this high profile, high level athlete that, you know, and so they, you know, want to be like Mike, so they want to drink Gatorade to do that.
Originally, Jordan was sponsored by Coke. He left Coke to join Gatorade for one main reason. He was one of about 30 sponsors for Coke, and Gatorade offered him the opportunity to be the first and only sponsor of Gatorade. The poaching of Michael Jordan not only helped sales in the US, but also around the world. According to former Quaker Oats president Phil Marino, quote, "Jordan got us instant credibility in countries where they had no idea what a sports drink was," end quote. Another cultural phenomenon that has helped Gatorade expand is the infamous Gatorade shower. A few players grab the Gatorade cooler that is on the bench and run out to dump it either on the player or the coach.
Oh, I think that that's almost, I think, becoming a tradition, you know, for not just with Gatorade but water, you know, to have coaches. It's almost like a rite of passage that the players have approved and appreciate everything that you've done for them, and that's certainly that Gatorade bath or that water bath at the end of the game signifies that. I bet you there's probably a little onus in there too, because if anybody's had some high-level coaches coaching them at certain times, they may not like them. So I'm sure there's a little bit of that involved in it too, a little bit of get back, so to speak.
The first coach to ever be showered with Gatorade was Bill Parcells in 1984. After it was introduced, it became a long-lasting tradition of big wins.
Gatorade baths. I think you were the first one that ever got it. What was that like? Did it annoy you? Did you like it?
Surprise. It always surprised me. You know, you're so attentive to what's going on, they can sneak up on you, and you don't know it's coming. So, I didn't mind it. Hey, it was their way of, you know, I busted them pretty good. And it was their way of getting me. And so if you're going to give it, you got to take a little. So every once in a while, I took it.
You know what I can't imagine?
Bert and Carson were the two instigators there.
But you're standing, let's say, on the sidelines at Veterans Stadium. It's 15 degrees. How does that feel?
They have no mercy.
While some of the advertising Gatorade has done can be viewed as iconic, some of the advertising they do is slightly misleading. Gatorade creates posters that they give to schools free of charge for schools to hang up all over their buildings. This is a clever form of advertising, as the poster does not appear to be a direct pitch of Gatorade. The approach is more general, with the posters containing information about nutrition and hydration, while keeping the Gatorade logo prominent on the poster. This is an example of a misleading poster that Gatorade gives to schools. The poster compares the color of urine of someone who is hydrated well and someone who is dehydrated. While this test is valid and can be used as a rather effective way to judge how hydrated an individual is, the conclusions the poster wants you to draw are biased. On the bottom of the poster, they sum up hydration very simply. Quote, "It's simple. Athletes lose fluids with sweat. Fluid loss can lead to dehydration. Dehydration can negatively affect your performance." End quote. The poster is laid out in order to grab people's attention, dumb down the science, then show the Gatorade logo so people subconsciously associate Gatorade with good hydration. The poster is very vague and works well in tricking people into thinking that Gatorade is the be-all end-all in sports hydration. What the posters do not do is incorporate any hard science or any facts and statistics. These posters do not explain how complex the solution to the problem is. Gatorade sells itself as a one-size-fits-all sports drink that can cater to athletes of all shapes and sizes, even though the science says something else.
And that's how they've made a business in this one size fits all, that one drink suits everybody. And that's, not true at all when it comes particularly to electrolytes. So if you have an athlete who loses the amount of sodium in their sweat that I showed previously, if those athletes try to replace the electrolytes with a sport like Gatorade, they would have to drink so much. I've done the calculation. They'd have to drink like 32 liters of Gatorade to replace that salt. And if they did that, it would kill them by something called hyponatremia. We call it exercise-associated hyponatremia, which comes from drinking so much dilute fluid. Gatorade's a very dilute fluid. Drinking so much fluid that it actually ends up causing your brain to swell, and people die from that. It has happened the last couple of years. We've had several football players. It used to be only a phenomenon that happened in endurance athletes. Exercise-associated hyponatremia was described by Tim Noakes, Dr. Tim Noakes from South Africa back in 1981. So we knew about this problem years ago with this drink, the whole mantra of drink to excess, drink as much as tolerated. And that was something that the sport drink industry pushed, because obviously if they push a lot of fluid replacement and they're selling what they're replacing, that's how they make a lot of money. But if you drank that much, you would actually make yourself fatally ill. So the sodium concentration in sweat is a whole nother topic that we need to talk about. So if you think about the amount of sodium that's in a typical sport drink, that's about this much salt actually. So that's sodium and chloride, so it's about that much salt. If you think about what some, and I've done this research, right? Some football and ice hockey players lose in the course of an hour, just 1 hour, if you think about salt. So this is sodium plus chloride, all right? So it's easiest to look at this as salt. So Gatorade has that amount in it that somebody might lose in an hour, and a football player might actually lose that much in an hour. So you can clearly see that you need to know who loses that much that might be okay to drink a sport drink like Gatorade where they're going to put that sodium back versus who loses that much. And you clearly cannot do that with a sport drink. You can't put that amount of electrolyte.
Since Gatorade does not have the right amount of electrolytes for everyone, it begs the question, why do many athletes choose Gatorade over water?
Probably the taste, because it's, folks are thirsty, and there is a sense of quenching kind of feeling, I guess, the satisfaction of something sweet. But again, like I said, sometimes if you're taking in too much of that sugary drink, it can have an adverse effect.
There's so much money that gets thrown into Gatorade. People think it's the best thing there is. Really the stuff that's in it, the extra stuff, electrolytes, carbs, are not enough to be replaced throughout activity, so it really does no better than what water would do.
Even though Gatorade has made a name for themselves in sports hydration, is Gatorade better than water, or vice versa?
The thing that people tend to think is that sports drinks are meant for everything in every situation. So sports drinks, the way they are made right now, are really made to be fluid replacement drinks. So if in fact it is fluid that you're trying to replace, then water is always the best drink to consume. And any of the research studies that look at whether or not sports drinks are good to use, they're always actually compared to water. So they're always as good as water. So the answer to that question is water in almost every case, unless you're talking about exercise that lasts more than 2 hours, endurance type of athletes that are burning a lot of carbohydrate may need to replace some carbohydrate, which is in your typical sport drink.
I like to actually dilute sports drinks. Depending on the sports drink, like if it's a Gatorade or a Powerade or something like that, typically those drinks have way too much sugar in them. So whenever you have an influx of sugar in your system, your body's got to digest that. So when that's taking place, you're taking blood away from the muscles, and it's being shunted to areas in your stomach so that it can be digested. So you don't want to have that competition for blood in your system when you're competing. So it's this balance between getting those, replenishing some of those electrolytes and even some sugars, light sugars, during competition that are really beneficial. So water, and then maybe a water and a sports drink diluted. I usually go half and half.
I recommend water for physical activity just because Gatorade, I would only recommend Gatorade for kids that cannot control blood sugar, sorry. So water, you lose fluids when you exercise, water replaces that.
So everybody who is exercising at a given intensity, in the same situation, the same environment, if you're talking about football and the same football equipment, everybody that is exercising at the same intensity is burning about the same amount of carbohydrate. So that stays pretty steady, pretty standard. The electrolyte issue is not at all standard. So what we've found in research is that you have people that sweat at varying rates, but even more importantly, you have people who sweat, their sweat content is very low in concentration of electrolytes. Sodium is what we typically talk about, versus people who are what we would call salty sweaters, where their concentration of sodium in sweat is very high. So let's talk about the sweat rate first. So in testing hundreds of athletes, different types of athletes, children, female athletes, the range of sweat rate, if you look in the literature, can be anywhere from a couple hundred milliliters an hour, which if you look at this is probably about 300 milliliters, or rather about 200 milliliters. So somebody that sweats this in the course of an hour, that might be a light female sweater, versus someone who sweats 4 of these an hour. So the highest sweat rates that I've ever measured are in NHL goalkeepers. And I've had 3 in the past 10 years that have sweated at a rate that exceeds 4 liters an hour, which means for a 2-hour practice, they are sweating 8 of these. Pretty common in large football players that they sweat about 3 of these an hour. So clearly there's a huge difference in the volume of fluid that you lose. So let me give you a reference number, okay? The amount of sodium that's in Gatorade is 19 millimoles per liter. So just keep the 19 in your mind, 19 millimoles per liter. The average amount of sodium in human sweat ranges from about 10 millimoles per liter to over 100. Okay, I've measured people that have maybe 120 millimoles per liter. So there's a huge range in the amount of sodium that somebody might lose, in a liter of sweat. Okay, so in this liter of sweat, somebody might sweat only, like I said, 10 millimoles per this, and somebody else might sweat 120 millimoles per this. The best way to hydrate during sports activities, if you're talking about the difference between sport drinks or water, is always water.
As you have seen, sports drinks do not live up to all the hype that surrounds them. Staying hydrated during physical activity is the key to good performance. People need to become more aware of what they are putting into their bodies and what they are getting out of it. Next time, think twice before picking up that sports drink.